The microphone squealed with feedback as I stepped up to the podium at Cedar Falls High School's gymnasium. 15 years after graduation, the same faded blue and gold banners hung from the rafters. But tonight, they would witness something unprecedented. Derek Hamilton sat at table 7, his smug expression still frozen from 30 seconds earlier, when he'd loudly declared to anyone within earshot that my cute little computer thing was probably just a hobby that barely paid my rent. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying across the reunion crowd with the same confidence I'd learned to project in boardrooms across 3 continents. Before we close tonight's festivities, I have an announcement to make about our beloved Cedar Falls High School. Derek's wife, Ashley, leaned forward, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the gymnasium lights, as she whispered something to the woman beside her. The same woman who had laughed when Derek made his comment about my business. The same laugh that had echoed through these very halls when I was 17, awkward, and convinced I'd never amount to anything in this town. I opened the leather portfolio I'd carried to the podium and withdrew a single document. As of this morning, TechFlow Solutions completed the acquisition of Cedar Falls High School and the surrounding educational campus. We'll be transforming it into the Midwest's premier technology and innovation academy. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's face drained of color as the implications sank in. His real estate company had been trying to secure this deal for months, positioning himself as the local hero who would save the failing school district. Instead, the girl he'd just mocked for her little business had quietly outbid him by several $1,000,000. My name is Lisa Parker, and 15 years ago, I graduated from Cedar Falls High School with a 4.0 GPA, 0 college prospects due to my family's financial situation, and a burning determination to prove that intelligence mattered more than connections. While my classmates headed off to state universities with their parents' blessing and checkbooks, I enrolled in the local community college's computer programming certification course, working nights at the town's only internet cafe to pay tuition. Cedar Falls, Ohio was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where high school social hierarchies extended well into adulthood, and where leaving was seen as either an act of betrayal or an admission that you weren't tough enough to make it in the real world. Population 12,000 on a good day, with one main street lined with family businesses that had been operating since the 1950s, and a shared understanding that dreams were nice, but practicality paid the bills. Derek Hamilton had been everything. I wasn't in high school. Star quarterback, homecoming king, son of the town's most successful real estate developer. While I spent my lunch periods in the computer lab teaching myself programming languages from outdated textbooks, Derek held court in the cafeteria, surrounded by admirers who hung on his every word. Our paths rarely crossed during those 4 years, but when they did, the interaction followed a predictable pattern. He would acknowledge my existence with the kind of polite indifference reserved for background characters in other people's stories. The defining moment came during senior year, when our economics teacher, Mr. Peterson, assigned a final project requiring students to present a business plan to the class. While Derek pitched his idea for expanding his father's real estate empire into commercial development, complete with glossy presentation boards funded by Hamilton Real Estate Group's marketing budget, I stood at the front of the classroom with hand-drawn charts explaining my concept for a software consulting business that would help small companies modernize their operations. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Derek's presentation was polished, professional, and entirely theoretical. Mine was scrappy, detailed, and based on actual research I'd conducted by interviewing local business owners about their technology challenges. When question time came, Derek fielded softball inquiries about profit margins and market expansion with rehearsed confidence. When my turn arrived, the questions were different. "But Lisa," came a voice from the back row, "who's going to trust a teenager with their business computers?" The class erupted in snickers. Derek's laugh was particularly memorable, not malicious exactly, but dismissive in the way that privilege allows. It said everything about how seriously my ambitions were taken by my peers. Mr. Peterson, to his credit, asked thoughtful questions about my technical specifications and implementation timeline. But the damage was done. In the social ecosystem of Cedar Falls High School, I had been categorized as the smart girl with unrealistic dreams, while Derek represented practical success and inherited wisdom. After graduation, I watched through social media as my former classmates followed predictable paths. Derek joined his father's business immediately, quickly earning his real estate license and a corner office with his name on the door. His engagement to Ashley Morgan, daughter of the town's bank president, was announced in the Cedar Falls Gazette with a full-page spread featuring their professional headshots and a detailed account of his proposal at the country club's annual charity gala. Meanwhile, I disappeared from the social radar entirely. Community college didn't generate the same congratulatory Facebook posts as four-year universities. Working the night shift at an internet cafe didn't photograph as well as fraternity, parties, or sorority formals. My absence from the town's social scene was noted but not mourned. I was simply another ambitious kid who would probably end up back home eventually, humbled by the reality that Cedar Falls was where I belonged. What nobody saw was the foundation I was building during those invisible years. The community college programming course led to a certification that landed me a junior developer position at a small software company in nearby Columbus. The 40-minute commute each way gave me time to listen to technology podcasts and audiobooks about business strategy. The entry-level salary was modest, but I lived with my mother in the same house where I'd grown up, banking every dollar possible, while learning everything I could about enterprise software development. My mother, Helen, had worked as a secretary at the school district's administrative office for 23 years, a job that provided health insurance and stability, but little in the way of advancement opportunities. She understood sacrifice and long-term thinking in ways that Derek's family never had to consider. When I told her about my plan to eventually start my own consulting business, she didn't question the feasibility or suggest more realistic alternatives. She simply asked what she could do to help. The internet cafe where I worked nights became my unofficial laboratory. During slow periods, which were frequent in a town that still viewed online activity with suspicion, I practiced building websites and database systems for imaginary clients. The owner, an eccentric former engineer named Tom Rodriguez, who had moved to Cedar Falls to escape the corporate rat race, became my first mentor and eventually my business partner. Tom had spent 15 years in Silicon Valley before burning out and buying the cafe as a semi-retirement project. He recognized my hunger immediately and began teaching me not just advanced programming techniques, but the business skills that community college hadn't covered. Contract negotiation, client management, project scoping, and most importantly, how to communicate technical concepts to non-technical decision-makers. The code is only half the battle, Tom would tell me during those late-night sessions when the cafe was empty, except for the occasional insomniac checking email. The other half is convincing people that you can solve problems they didn't even know they had. Our first real client came through Tom's network. A small manufacturing company in Columbus was struggling with inventory management, using a combination of spreadsheets and paper records that couldn't keep pace with their growth. The project was worth $8,000, more money than I'd ever seen in one place, and represented 6 weeks of intensive work, building a custom database system and training their staff to use it. Derek Hamilton sold his first house that same month, a transaction that earned him a commission of $12,000 and a congratulatory article in the real estate section of the local newspaper. The contrast wasn't lost on me. His success was visible, celebrated, and understood by everyone in town. Mine was invisible, technical, and appreciated only by the client whose business I'd transformed. But transformation was exactly what was happening, both for my clients and for me. Each project taught me something new about business operations, industry challenges, and the gap between what companies needed and what technology could provide. I began to see patterns that extended far beyond individual clients. Small and medium-sized businesses across the Midwest were struggling with the same fundamental problem. They knew technology could make them more efficient, but they lacked the expertise to implement solutions effectively. The turning point came during my third year out of high school. Tom and I had officially partnered to create TechFlow Solutions, combining his business experience with my technical skills and relentless work ethic. We'd moved beyond single project contracts to ongoing consulting relationships, helping companies not just implement new systems but develop long-term technology strategies. Our breakthrough client was a regional logistics company that had been bleeding money due to inefficient routing and inventory management. The existing system, installed by a large consulting firm for 3 times what we were charging, was overly complex and poorly adapted to their specific needs. In 6 months, we rebuilt their entire operational infrastructure and reduced their overhead costs by 30%. Word spread quickly through the tight network of Midwest business owners. Success stories in the logistics industry opened doors in manufacturing, which led to opportunities in healthcare administration, which created demand in financial services. Each sector brought new challenges and new opportunities to prove that sophisticated technology solutions didn't require enormous consulting firms with correspondingly enormous fees. By the time Derek Hamilton made his first appearance on the local Chamber of Commerce's Rising Stars Under 30 list, TechFlow Solutions was generating annual revenue that exceeded the GDP of several small countries. The difference was that Derek's success was measured in houses sold and commission checks deposited, while mine was measured in systems optimized and businesses transformed. The invisibility that had once frustrated me became a strategic advantage. While Derek built his reputation through community involvement and social networking, I built mine through results that spoke louder than any marketing campaign. Client. Referrals led to industry recognition, which led to speaking engagements at technology conferences, which led to partnerships with Fortune 500 companies seeking specialized expertise. Cedar Falls remained my official address throughout this period, though I spent most of my time traveling between client sites in Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, and Columbus. My mother still worked at the school district office, still lived in the same house, still received the local newspaper that occasionally featured Derek's latest real estate achievements. But she also received quarterly profit-sharing checks from TechFlow Solutions that exceeded her annual salary, and watched her daughter's company grow from a 2-person operation to a recognized leader in enterprise software consulting. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. While Derek was celebrated locally for selling houses to people who already lived in Cedar Falls, I was quietly revolutionizing business operations for companies that employed thousands of workers across multiple states. His success was visible but limited to the boundaries of our small town. Mine was invisible but scalable across industries and regions. As our 15th high school reunion approached, I found myself in an interesting position. TechFlow Solutions had recently completed its largest acquisition to date, purchasing a struggling educational technology firm and integrating their resources into our expanding portfolio. The deal had positioned us perfectly for a major expansion into the education sector, with particular interest in transforming traditional learning institutions into technology-forward environments. When the reunion invitation arrived in my mother's mailbox, addressed to my childhood bedroom, I almost didn't respond. The thought of returning to Cedar Falls High School's gymnasium, surrounded by people who remembered me as the quiet girl with the impractical computer dreams, held little appeal. But something about the timing felt significant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Derek Hamilton's name was prominently featured on the reunion committee, along with his wife Ashley, and several other members of the social hierarchy that had defined our high school experience. Tom encouraged me to attend, pointing out that 15 years was long enough for perspectives to shift and accomplishments to speak for themselves. Besides, he said with the grin that had sustained us through countless late-night debugging sessions, don't you want to see their faces when they realize what you've been up to? The weeks leading up to the reunion coincided with delicate negotiations regarding Cedar Falls High School itself. The district's financial troubles had been mounting for years, exacerbated by declining enrollment and aging infrastructure. The state had begun discussions about consolidating several rural districts, which would likely result in the closure of individual schools and the loss of Cedar Falls' educational independence. Several potential buyers had emerged, each proposing different solutions to the district's crisis. Derek Hamilton's real estate company had submitted a bid to purchase the property and convert it into a mixed-use development combining commercial space with residential units. A national chain had proposed transforming the building into a distribution center. And quietly, through intermediaries and legal representatives, TechFlow Solutions had been exploring the possibility of acquiring the entire campus for a very different purpose. The reunion committee had organized the event as a combination fundraiser and community celebration, with proceeds supporting the school's technology upgrade fund. The irony was perfect. They were raising money to buy computers and software from companies like mine, while the girl they'd once laughed at for her technology ambitions was positioned to purchase their entire institution. I spent the morning of the reunion in final negotiations with the school district's attorneys, finalizing details that would remain confidential until the appropriate moment. The purchase price was substantial enough to ensure the district's financial stability while providing TechFlow Solutions with the perfect laboratory for developing and testing educational technology innovations. More importantly, it would transform Cedar Falls High School from a struggling rural institution into a flagship academy that would attract students and faculty from across the region. As I prepared for the evening's festivities, selecting a simple black dress that suggested success without screaming about it, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 15 years earlier, I had stood in that same gymnasium, invisible among my more socially connected classmates, convinced that my only path to success lay in escaping Cedar Falls entirely. Instead, I had discovered that success wasn't about escaping your origins, but about transforming them. TechFlow Solutions hadn't succeeded despite my Cedar Falls background, but because of it. The work ethic, practical problem-solving, and determination to prove myself that had been forged in this small Ohio town had become the foundation of everything I'd accomplished. The reunion would be more than a social gathering. It would be a demonstration that the quiet girl with the impractical dreams had been building something remarkable all along, and Derek Hamilton, who had dismissed my little business before the evening even began, was about to learn that underestimating people based on their high school personas was a mistake, with consequences that could last decades. The Grand Oak Country Club had been Cedar Falls' crown jewel for as long as anyone could remember, its colonial-style architecture and manicured golf course serving as the backdrop for every significant social event in the county. As I pulled into the circular driveway in my rental car, a modest sedan that wouldn't draw attention or speculation, I watched former classmates emerging from luxury vehicles that spoke volumes about their current circumstances. Derek Hamilton arrived in a gleaming black BMW, stepping out with the same confident stride that had characterized his high school years. His wife Ashley followed, her designer dress and perfect hair suggesting that the Hamilton family's financial success extended well beyond Derek's real estate commissions. They moved through the crowd like visiting royalty, accepting congratulations and dispensing air kisses with practiced ease. I observed this performance from the parking lot, taking a moment to center myself before entering what would undoubtedly be a carefully orchestrated social hierarchy. 15 years had passed, but the fundamental dynamics of Cedar Falls society remained unchanged. Success was measured by visible markers, status determined by family connections, and respect allocated according to everyone's shared understanding of who mattered and who didn't. The reunion committee had transformed the country club's main ballroom into a nostalgic recreation of our high school years. Blue and gold streamers hung from the ceiling, yearbook photos were projected on screens throughout the room, and a DJ played the same songs that had soundtracked our teenage years. The effect was simultaneously charming and surreal, as if time had stopped in 2008, and we were all trying to remember who we used to be. Brian Foster, who had been student council president and was now apparently working in insurance, approached me near the registration table with genuine warmth. "Lisa Parker, I wasn't sure you'd make it back for this." His smile seemed authentic, free from the calculating assessment that characterized many of the evening's interactions. "I almost didn't," I admitted, accepting a name tag that featured my senior year photo alongside my current information. The contrast was stark, but not unflattering. The awkward teenager with thick glasses and uncertain posture had evolved into someone more confident, though I'd maintained the same understated style that had always suited me. "What have you been up to? I remember you were always working on those computer projects." Brian's question was casual, but I detected genuine curiosity rather than polite obligation. "I started a consulting business a few years after graduation. Software development, system integration, that sort of thing." I kept my answer deliberately vague, having learned that detailed explanations of TechFlow Solutions' scope and success often generated more skepticism than admiration, particularly in environments where technology remained somewhat mysterious. "That's fantastic. The whole tech boom has been incredible to watch." Brian's enthusiasm was refreshing, though I suspected he didn't fully grasp the implications of what I'd described. "Have you met Derek's wife, Ashley? She was asking about you earlier." This revelation surprised me. Ashley Morgan Hamilton had been 2 years ahead of us in school, part of an exclusive social circle that had barely acknowledged my existence during our overlapping time at Cedar Falls High. Her current interest seemed unlikely to stem from fond memories of our teenage interactions. Before I could respond, Derek himself materialized beside us, his timing suggesting he'd been monitoring my arrival. His greeting was effusive in the way that successful people often employ when encountering former classmates, whose current circumstances remain unclear. "Lisa Parker, look at you, all grown up and successful looking." His tone was jovial but carried undertones that I remembered from high school, a subtle condescension disguised as friendliness. "Brian was just telling everyone about your little computer business. That's so great that you've kept up with technology." The phrase "little computer business" landed like a carefully aimed insult, designed to diminish my accomplishments while maintaining plausible deniability. Derek's smile never wavered, but his eyes assessed my reaction with the calculating precision of someone accustomed to social manipulation. "It's been an interesting journey," I replied evenly, refusing to take the bait or provide additional details that he could use to further minimize my achievements. "Congratulations on your success with Hamilton Real Estate. I see your name in the newspaper regularly." "Oh, you know how it is in a small town. Every little achievement gets blown out of proportion." Derek's false modesty was expertly deployed, acknowledging his visibility while suggesting that his accomplishments were too numerous to catalog. Though I have to say, we've been expanding beyond traditional residential sales, commercial development, municipal projects, that sort of thing. Ashley appeared at Derek's elbow as if summoned, her arrival perfectly timed to support whatever narrative he was constructing. "Derek's been working with the school district on some exciting possibilities," she added, her voice carrying the authority of someone privy to important information. "There are so many opportunities to revitalize the community through strategic development." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Derek and Ashley taking turns describing various projects and initiatives that positioned them as Cedar Falls' premier power couple. Their approach was sophisticated, never directly asking about my circumstances, but creating opportunities for me to reveal details they could then contextualize within their understanding of appropriate success metrics. I provided minimal information, deflecting their probes with questions about their own endeavors and expressing appropriate admiration for their achievements. This dynamic felt familiar from countless business negotiations, where gathering intelligence while revealing nothing had proven essential to maintaining strategic advantage. As the evening progressed, I moved through the reunion crowd with anthropological fascination. Former athletes described coaching their children's sports teams while working in family businesses or local government positions. Academic achievers had become teachers, accountants, and middle managers in regional companies. The handful of classmates who had left Cedar Falls for college or military service had mostly returned within a few years, drawn back by family obligations or the gravitational pull of familiar surroundings. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: initial surprise at my presence, polite inquiries about my current situation, brief confusion when I mentioned consulting work, and eventual dismissal when my explanations failed to fit their understanding of recognizable career paths. The few classmates who expressed genuine interest in technology quickly lost focus when I avoided providing specific details about TechFlow Solutions' scope or client base. The evening's entertainment included a slideshow of high school memories, complete with superlative awards for various categories of achievement since graduation. Derek Hamilton was recognized for Most Successful Entrepreneur, while Ashley received acknowledgement for Best Community Leader. Their acceptance speeches were gracious and appropriate, emphasizing gratitude for their Cedar Falls roots and commitment to giving back to the community that had shaped them. During Derek's speech, he made a point of acknowledging various classmates who had made their mark in different fields, including several who had achieved modest success in traditional careers. The omission of my name was clearly intentional, a subtle indication that my achievements either didn't register on his radar or didn't merit recognition within his framework of meaningful accomplishment. The pattern of exclusion continued throughout the evening's formal activities. When former teachers were invited to share memories of standout students, my academic achievements went unmentioned, despite having graduated as valedictorian. When classmates were encouraged to share updates about their careers, I wasn't approached by the reunion committee organizers who seemed to be orchestrating these informal presentations. Most telling was the moment when conversation turned to the school district's financial challenges. Derek held court near the bar, explaining to a captivated audience how his real estate company was positioned to help solve the crisis through innovative development strategies. "The key is thinking beyond traditional approaches," he declared, his voice carrying across the nearby tables. "Cedar Falls High School sits on incredibly valuable land, but the district is locked into outdated thinking about educational facilities. With the right vision and community support, we could transform that property into something that actually generates revenue while serving the area's long-term needs." His presentation was polished and persuasive, complete with references to successful similar projects in other communities and detailed explanations of how zoning changes could maximize the property's potential value. The audience was clearly impressed, nodding along as Derek outlined his company's preliminary proposals for mixed-use development that would preserve some educational function while creating sustainable income streams. Of course, any project like this requires extensive community input and careful planning, Ashley added, her timing perfect as always. Derek's been meeting with district officials for months, working through the complexities of public-private partnerships and ensuring that whatever solution emerges truly serves Cedar Falls' best interests. The implication was clear. Derek Hamilton wasn't just another businessman seeking profit from the district's misfortune, but a hometown hero working tirelessly to save an institution that had shaped all of their lives. His approach combined local loyalty with business expertise, making him the obvious choice to lead whatever transition ultimately occurred. I listened to this performance with growing appreciation for Derek's strategic sophistication. He had correctly identified the school district's crisis as both a business opportunity and a platform for enhancing his community standing. His proposal was reasonable, his credentials were legitimate, and his presentation was expertly calibrated to appeal to an audience that valued practical solutions over abstract idealism. What Derek couldn't have known was that his innovative development strategies had been under evaluation by TechFlow Solutions for the past 8 months. While he was cultivating relationships with district officials and community leaders, my company's attorneys were conducting due diligence investigations and financial analysis that dwarfed anything his real estate firm could have undertaken. The fundamental difference was one of scale and purpose. Derek saw Cedar Falls High School as a valuable piece of real estate that could be repurposed for maximum profit within the constraints of local zoning regulations. TechFlow Solutions saw it as the cornerstone of a comprehensive educational technology initiative that would establish Cedar Falls as a regional hub for innovation and learning. Our preliminary investment was already 10 times larger than Derek's proposed development budget. Our timeline extended decades beyond his 5-year commercial development plan. Most importantly, our vision preserved and enhanced the property's educational mission rather than relegating it to secondary status within a mixed-use framework. But none of this information was visible to the reunion crowd gathering around Derek's impromptu presentation. They saw a successful local businessman with deep community roots proposing a thoughtful solution to a complex problem. His credentials were transparent, his motivations were clear, and his track record was established through years of successful projects. By contrast, I remained an enigma whose current circumstances generated more questions than answers. My reluctance to provide detailed information about my work was interpreted as either modesty about modest achievements or embarrassment about disappointing outcomes. The possibility that I might be operating at a scale that rendered local real estate development irrelevant simply didn't register as plausible within their framework of reasonable expectations. As the evening wound down, Derek made a point of approaching me one final time, his confidence clearly bolstered by the positive reception his presentation had received. "It was really great catching up with you, Lisa. I hope your consulting work continues to go well." His tone was patronizing in the way that successful people often adopt when speaking to those they perceive as less accomplished. "I'm sure you'll figure out your niche eventually," he continued, apparently interpreting my reserved demeanor as uncertainty about my professional direction. "Technology is such a fast-moving field, it must be challenging to keep up with all the changes while working independently." Ashley nodded sympathetically. "It's so admirable when people follow their passion, even when it's not financially practical. Derek always says that small businesses are the backbone of communities like ours, even if they don't generate the kind of revenue that larger companies can achieve." Their combined assault was expertly executed, expressing support and encouragement, while systematically undermining any possibility that my work might be significant or successful. The subtext was unmistakable. I was a well-meaning amateur playing at business while they operated at a level of professional competence that generated real results and community impact. "Thank you for the encouragement," I replied, maintaining the same neutral tone I'd employed throughout the evening. It's always inspiring to see how different people define success and contribution. As I prepared to leave the reunion, having gathered sufficient intelligence about the social dynamics and power structures that would shape the coming weeks, Derek delivered his final assessment. "You know, Lisa, it's interesting how some people peak in high school and others really come into their own later in life. I think you're probably just getting started with whatever your real calling turns out to be." The comment was designed to be encouraging while simultaneously dismissing everything I'd accomplished since graduation. Derek's worldview didn't allow for the possibility that the quiet girl with impractical computer dreams had already surpassed his achievements by any meaningful metric. His success was visible, celebrated, and understood by everyone in Cedar Falls. Therefore, anything outside that framework of recognition couldn't represent genuine accomplishment. What Derek had unknowingly done was provide me with perfect insight into how the community would receive the next day's announcement. His dismissal of my little computer business would make the revelation that TechFlow Solutions had outbid His real estate company for the school property all the more impactful. As I drove home through the familiar streets of Cedar Falls, past the houses where my former classmates had settled into lives that largely mirrored their parents' experiences, I reflected on the evening's dynamics. 15 years had passed, but the fundamental social hierarchies remained unchanged. Success was still measured by local visibility, respect was still allocated according to family connections, and innovation was still viewed with suspicion unless it generated immediately recognizable results. Tomorrow would change all of that. Not through dramatic confrontation or public humiliation, but through the simple revelation that the girl they'd continued to underestimate had been building something extraordinary while they were focused on more traditional markers of achievement. The irony was perfect. Derek Hamilton had spent the evening positioning himself as Cedar Falls' visionary leader, the successful entrepreneur who would save their beloved high school through innovative thinking and community commitment. Meanwhile, the actual visionary sat quietly in the corner, already holding the contracts that would transform their shared alma mater into something none of them had imagined possible. The morning after the reunion dawned gray and drizzly, matching my contemplative mood as I sat in my childhood bedroom reviewing documents that would reshape Cedar Falls' future. My mother had already left for her job at the district administrative office, where she would spend the day processing paperwork related to budget constraints and staffing reductions that had become routine parts of her responsibilities. The coffee maker gurgled downstairs as I spread the contents of my briefcase across the small desk where I had once struggled through calculus homework and college application essays. Legal documents, financial projections, and architectural renderings told the story of a negotiation that had been unfolding for months, while the community remained focused on more visible but ultimately insignificant developments. Tom Rodriguez arrived at 8:30 sharp, carrying a box of pastries from the bakery on Main Street, and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had successfully orchestrated a complex acquisition without alerting any local competitors. His presence in Cedar Falls always generated curiosity from longtime residents who couldn't quite categorize a former Silicon Valley engineer who chose to operate a small-town internet cafe while simultaneously managing multi-million-dollar consulting contracts. "The final signatures came through at 6 this morning," he announced, settling into my mother's kitchen chair and opening his laptop to display email confirmations from the district's attorneys. "Everything is officially transferred as of today, pending the public announcement at this afternoon's emergency board meeting." The timing was perfect. Derek Hamilton would spend the morning believing that his presentation at the reunion had solidified his position as the community's preferred solution to the school crisis. His real estate company's proposal remained under consideration by the district board, which had scheduled today's meeting to address what they described as new developments regarding the property situation. What the board members knew, but had been contractually prohibited from revealing until today, was that TechFlow Solutions had submitted a final offer that exceeded all competing bids while guaranteeing outcomes that no traditional development project could match. The purchase price alone was sufficient to eliminate the district's debt and establish an endowment fund that would support educational initiatives throughout the county for decades. More importantly, our proposal preserved the school's educational mission while transforming it into something unprecedented in rural Ohio. The Cedar Falls Academy for Technology and Innovation would serve as both a working high school for local students and a research facility where TechFlow Solutions would develop and test educational software applications. Students would have access to resources typically available only at major universities, while the surrounding community would benefit from the economic activity generated by a regional technology hub. The morning's preparation involved final coordination with the public relations firm we had retained to manage the announcement's rollout. The story needed careful framing to emphasize community benefit, while acknowledging the dramatic nature of the change. Local media had been briefed on background information. State education officials had been notified of the transition timeline. and key community leaders had received advance copies of materials they would need to address inevitable questions from constituents. My role in today's revelation would be carefully calibrated. TechFlow Solutions' ownership of the project was well documented and legally established, but the company's connection to Cedar Falls' former valedictorian had been deliberately obscured throughout the negotiation process. The reunion crowd would need several hours to process the implications of Derek's dismissive comments about my little computer business before understanding that they had been witnessing a dramatic miscalculation in real time. The district's emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the high school library, the same room where I had spent countless hours researching college scholarships and programming techniques during my senior year. The irony of returning to that space as the new owner, rather than a visiting alumna, was not lost on me, though I planned to observe the proceedings discreetly rather than making any dramatic entrances. Tom and I spent the late morning reviewing transition plans with the project managers who would oversee the Academy's transformation. The scope of work was breathtaking: complete infrastructure modernization, laboratory construction, faculty recruitment, curriculum development, and technology implementation that would establish Cedar Falls as a model for 21st century education. The preliminary budget allocated more resources to this single project than the town's entire annual economic output. Construction contracts would employ local workers for the next 18 months, while permanent staffing would bring dozens of highly educated professionals to the area. The economic impact extended far beyond the school itself, creating demand for housing, services, and supporting businesses that would revitalize Cedar Falls' economy. At 1:30, I drove to the high school and parked in the visitor lot where I had nervously arrived for my first day of classes 15 years earlier. The building looked smaller than I remembered, its brick facade showing signs of deferred maintenance that reflected the district's financial struggles. Within 2 years, those same walls would house some of the most advanced educational technology in the Midwest. The library was crowded with community members who had received short notice about the emergency meeting, but understood that significant news was forthcoming. Derek Hamilton sat in the front row with Ashley and several other prominent citizens, his confident posture suggesting he expected today's announcement to confirm his company's selection for the development project. Principal Catherine Wells called the meeting to order with obvious nervousness, her usual composure strained by the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. The district superintendent, board members, and legal counsel flanked her at a table, facing the audience, their formal arrangement suggesting the gravity of the proceedings. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice," Principal Wells began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's familiar acoustics. "Today's meeting concerns the future of Cedar Falls High School and our district's financial stability. As you know, we have been exploring various options to address our budgetary challenges while maintaining our educational mission." She paused, glancing at her notes before continuing. "I am pleased to announce that we have reached an agreement with TechFlow Solutions, a technology consulting firm, for the purchase of our campus and facilities. This transaction will eliminate our debt, establish an endowment fund, and transform our school into the Cedar Falls Academy for Technology and Innovation." The initial reaction was confused silence as audience members processed information that contradicted their expectations. Derek's confident expression faltered slightly, though he maintained his composure while trying to understand how a company he had never heard of had emerged as the successful bidder. Principal Wells continued with details about the Academy's mission, the timeline for transformation, and the benefits that would accrue to current students and the broader community. The financial terms were staggering by local standards, representing an investment that dwarfed any previous economic development in the area. TechFlow Solutions brings extensive experience in educational technology and a commitment to establishing Cedar Falls as a regional center for innovation and learning, she explained, reading from prepared remarks that had been carefully crafted to address anticipated concerns. Their proposal preserves our educational mission while providing resources that will benefit students throughout the region. Questions began immediately, with Derek leading the inquiry in his capacity as a concerned community member and unsuccessful bidder. His questions were pointed but professional, seeking information about TechFlow Solutions' background, experience, and connection to the local community. "I think we all appreciate the district's diligence in exploring various options," Derek said, his tone measured despite his obvious surprise at the outcome. "However, I'm curious about this company's track record with educational projects and their understanding of our community's specific needs and values." Principal Wells deferred to the superintendent, who provided background information about TechFlow Solutions' corporate history, client portfolio, and previous work in educational technology. The presentation was impressive, though it carefully avoided mentioning the company's local connections or the identity of its founder. Ashley Hamilton raised her hand with a follow-up question that revealed the family's concern about being outmaneuvered by an unknown competitor. "Has TechFlow Solutions worked in rural communities before? We want to ensure that whoever takes over our school understands the unique character of places like Cedar Falls." The question was diplomatically phrased but clearly designed to suggest that an outside technology firm might lack the cultural sensitivity necessary to serve the community effectively. The implication was that local developers like Hamilton Real Estate possessed superior understanding of Cedar Falls's needs and preferences. The superintendent's response was thorough and reassuring, emphasizing TechFlow Solutions' experience with diverse communities and their commitment to preserving local character while introducing modern capabilities. However, the audience remained somewhat skeptical about entrusting their beloved institution to a company with no apparent local ties. Brian Foster, sitting near the back of the room, asked the question that would change everything. "Is there any connection between TechFlow Solutions and our community? It seems unusual for a technology firm to choose Cedar Falls for such a significant investment without some local knowledge or connection." The moment had arrived. Principal Wells looked toward the back of the room where I sat quietly among the other community members, her slight nod indicating that the time for revelation had come. I stood slowly, feeling the attention of the room shift toward me as people recognized the girl who had been dismissed as irrelevant just 16 hours earlier. The transition from invisible observer to central figure was dramatic, though I maintained the same calm demeanor that had characterized my entire evening at the reunion. "TechFlow Solutions was founded in Cedar Falls," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the library's acoustics. "I started the company after graduating from this high school, using skills I learned in these classrooms and computer labs. This investment represents our commitment to ensuring that future students have access to opportunities that extend far beyond what was available to my generation." The silence that followed was profound. Derek's face went through a series of expressions as he processed the implications of what I had just revealed. The little computer business he had dismissed so casually was not only real, but substantial, enough to purchase his target acquisition outright. Ashley's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly as she realized that the quiet girl she had barely acknowledged in high school had been operating at a level of success that made their own achievements seem modest by comparison. The social hierarchy that had seemed so established just hours earlier was suddenly revealed as based on incomplete information and outdated assumptions. Other reunion attendees began connecting the dots between our previous evening's conversations and the magnitude of what was being announced. My reluctance to provide details about my consulting work now made perfect sense, as did my calm response to Derek's condescending assessment of my career prospects. The questions that followed were different in tone and substance from the earlier inquiries. Community members wanted to understand how someone they had known since childhood had built a company capable of transforming their town's future. The curiosity was genuine, though tinged with the discomfort that comes from realizing you have fundamentally misunderstood someone's circumstances. Derek's questions became more specific and pointed, reflecting his professional interest in understanding how he had been so thoroughly outmaneuvered by a competitor he hadn't even known existed. His real estate expertise was sufficient to appreciate the complexity and scale of what TechFlow Solutions had accomplished, making his earlier dismissal all the more embarrassing. "I have to admit, Lisa, I'm impressed," he said during a break. In the formal proceedings, his tone now respectful but strained. "I clearly underestimated the scope of your business when we spoke last night." The apology was grudging but necessary, delivered in front of an audience that was rapidly reassessing their own assumptions about success, achievement, and the young woman who had quietly surpassed all of their expectations while they were focused on more traditional measures of accomplishment. What Derek couldn't yet understand was that this revelation was only the beginning. The transformation of Cedar Falls High School would unfold over the coming months, bringing changes that would challenge every assumption the community held about their place in the regional economy and their potential for future growth. As the meeting concluded and community members began discussing the implications of what they had learned, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 15 years earlier, I had sat in this same room as an invisible student, with impractical dreams and no clear path toward achieving them. Today, I was returning as the catalyst for changes that would reshape my hometown's future. The girl Derek Hamilton had dismissed as having a little computer business was about to demonstrate that underestimating people based on limited information was a mistake with consequences that could reshape entire communities. The morning of the emergency board meeting arrived with unseasonable warmth for October in Ohio, as if the weather itself was preparing for the dramatic shift about to unfold in Cedar Falls. I had awakened before dawn, not from anxiety, but from the anticipation that comes with knowing you're about to reveal something that will fundamentally alter how people perceive reality. My mother had already left for her job at the district office, where she would spend the morning processing routine paperwork, while knowing that by afternoon, her workplace would be transformed beyond recognition. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that Helen Parker, who had spent 23 years managing the administrative details of a struggling school district, would soon be working for an institution with resources that exceeded anything she had ever imagined possible. The dining room table in our modest house was covered with documents that told the story of a negotiation conducted in absolute secrecy, while the community focused on Derek Hamilton's increasingly public campaign to position his real estate company as the obvious solution to the district's crisis. Legal contracts, architectural renderings, financial projections, and implementation timelines represented months of work that had proceeded invisibly, while Derek held court at city council meetings and Chamber of Commerce gatherings. Tom Rodriguez arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying coffee from the new shop that had opened on Main Street to serve the growing number of visitors attracted by rumors of significant development activity. His expression mixed satisfaction with concern about the potential volatility of what we were about to unleash. "The final insurance and bonding paperwork cleared at midnight," he announced, settling into my mother's kitchen chair and opening his laptop to display confirmation emails from various regulatory agencies. "Everything is legally binding as of this morning, regardless of how the community reacts to the news." The protection was necessary. Small communities could be unpredictable when confronted with change that challenged their fundamental assumptions about power, influence, and the sources of meaningful achievement. While I expected the revelation to be shocking, I wanted to ensure that surprise didn't evolve into opposition that could complicate the Academy's development. Our morning was devoted to final coordination with the public relations specialists, who would manage media coverage of the announcement. The story needed careful framing to emphasize community benefit while acknowledging the dramatic nature of what was being revealed. Regional newspapers had been briefed on background information. State education officials had received advance copies of key documents, and community leaders had been provided with talking points they could use to address inevitable questions from constituents. The challenge was managing the narrative arc so that Derek Hamilton's dismissive comments about my little computer business would be understood as a dramatic miscalculation rather than simply unfortunate timing. The educational value of his error extended beyond personal embarrassment into broader lessons about the dangers of making assumptions based on incomplete information or social prejudices. At 11:30, I drove to the high school for a final walkthrough of facilities that would soon undergo comprehensive transformation. The building looked exactly as it had during my student years, its faded paint and outdated fixtures reflecting the financial constraints that had limited the district's ability to maintain infrastructure or upgrade technology. Within 18 months, these same hallways would house some of the most advanced educational technology in the Midwest. The gymnasium where tonight's reunion had taken place would be converted into a conference center capable of hosting international academic conferences. The library where this afternoon's meeting would occur would become the central hub of a research facility that would attract students and faculty from throughout the region. Principal Catherine Wells met me at the main entrance, her nervous excitement evident despite her efforts to maintain professional composure. "I keep having to remind myself that this is really happening," she confided as we walked toward the library. 6 months ago, we were discussing which programs to cut due to budget constraints. This afternoon, we'll be announcing the largest educational investment in the county's history. Her comment reflected the magnitude of transformation that extended far beyond simple facility upgrades or enrollment expansion. The Cedar Falls Academy for Technology and Innovation would establish the community as a regional center for educational excellence while preserving the personal attention and local character that had always distinguished small-town institutions. The library was being prepared for the emergency board meeting that would formally announce the acquisition, though most community members remained unaware of the meeting's true purpose. The official notice had described the gathering as a discussion of new developments regarding facility planning, language that suggested incremental changes rather than revolutionary transformation. Derek Hamilton would attend expecting to receive confirmation that his real estate company's proposal had been accepted, possibly with some modifications requested by the board or state education officials. His confidence was based on reasonable assumptions. His local connections were excellent. His company's track record was solid, and no credible competition had emerged during months of public discussion about the district's options. What Derek couldn't have anticipated was that the most credible competition had been operating invisibly within his own community, conducted by someone whose capabilities he had consistently underestimated based on outdated high school social dynamics and incomplete understanding of what constituted meaningful business achievement. The irony extended beyond Derek's personal miscalculation into broader questions about how communities identify and nurture talent. Cedar Falls had produced someone capable of transforming their shared institution, but their social frameworks had been inadequate for recognizing her potential or supporting her development. Instead, they had celebrated more visible but ultimately limited achievements while overlooking the quiet work that would prove most significant. At 1 o'clock, I positioned myself in the back corner of the library, choosing a seat that would allow me to observe the proceedings while remaining inconspicuous until the moment for revelation arrived. The room filled quickly with community members who had received short notice about the emergency meeting but understood that significant news was forthcoming. Derek Hamilton occupied a front row seat with Ashley and several other prominent citizens, his confident posture reflecting his expectation that today's announcement would confirm his company's selection for the development project. His preparation was evident in the folder of documents he carried and the way he positioned himself to address questions or provide additional information when called upon. The other reunion attendees who had heard Derek's dismissive comments about my business were scattered throughout the audience, their presence ensuring that the dramatic reversal would have maximum witnesses. Brian Foster sat near the middle, genuinely curious about developments that could affect the community's future. Various other classmates occupied seats based on their level of interest in local affairs and their availability on short notice. Principal Wells called the meeting to order with obvious nervousness, her usual composure strained by the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. The district superintendent, board members, and legal counsel flanked her at a table facing the audience, their formal arrangement suggesting the gravity of proceedings that most attendees assumed would involve routine facility planning discussions. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice," Principal Wells began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's familiar acoustics. "Today's meeting concerns significant developments in our district's facility planning and financial situation. As many of you know, we have been exploring various options to address our budgetary challenges while maintaining our educational mission." The language was carefully chosen to prepare the audience for major news, while avoiding premature revelation of details that needed proper context and explanation. The board had spent considerable time crafting an announcement strategy that would maximize community understanding while minimizing potential confusion or opposition. "I am pleased to announce that we have reached agreement with TechFlow Solutions, an educational technology consulting firm, for the comprehensive acquisition and transformation of our campus facilities," Principal Wells continued, reading from prepared remarks that had been reviewed by legal counsel and communications specialists. The initial reaction was confused silence as audience members processed information that contradicted their expectations about incremental facility improvements or modest development partnerships. Derek's confident expression faltered slightly as he tried to understand how a company he had never heard of had emerged as the successful bidder for a project he had been pursuing for months. Principal Wells continued with details about the Academy's mission, transformation timeline, and benefits that would accrue to current students and the broader community. The financial terms were staggering by local standards, representing an investment that exceeded the total economic activity of several surrounding communities. TechFlow Solutions brings extensive experience in educational technology and a demonstrated commitment to rural community development, she explained, providing background information that had been carefully researched to address anticipated questions about the company's qualifications and intentions. The questions began immediately, with Derek leading the inquiry in his capacity as a concerned community member and unsuccessful bidder. His questions were pointed but professional, seeking information about TechFlow Solutions' corporate history, previous projects, and understanding of Cedar Falls' unique characteristics and needs. "I think we all appreciate the district's diligence in exploring various options for addressing our challenges," Derek said, his tone measured despite his obvious surprise at being outmaneuvered by an unknown competitor. "However, I'm curious about this company's experience with rural communities and their understanding of our specific values and priorities." The question was diplomatically phrased, but clearly designed to suggest that an outside technology firm might lack the cultural sensitivity necessary to serve Cedar Falls effectively. The implication was that local developers like Hamilton Real Estate possessed superior understanding of community needs and preferences. Principal Wells deferred to the superintendent, who provided detailed information about TechFlow Solutions' corporate portfolio, client testimonials, and previous work in educational technology. The presentation was comprehensive and impressive, though it carefully avoided mentioning the company's local connections or the personal history that had motivated their interest in Cedar Falls. Ashley Hamilton raised her hand with a follow-up question that revealed the family's concern about being outmaneuvered by competitors they had failed to identify or assess. "Has TechFlow Solutions worked in communities similar to Cedar Falls before? We want to ensure that whoever transforms our institution understands the unique character and traditions that make our community special." Her question was thoughtfully phrased, but reflected the underlying assumption that successful technology companies must be based in urban markets and therefore unfamiliar with rural values and priorities. The possibility that TechFlow Solutions might have intimate knowledge of Cedar Falls through personal connections simply didn't register as plausible within their framework of reasonable expectations. The superintendent's response was thorough and reassuring, emphasizing TechFlow Solutions' commitment to preserving local character while introducing modern capabilities. However, the audience remained somewhat skeptical about entrusting their beloved institution to a company with no apparent local ties or demonstrated understanding of their community's specific needs. Brian Foster, sitting near the back of the room, asked the question that would trigger everything that followed. Is there any connection between TechFlow Solutions and our community? It seems unusual for a technology firm to choose Cedar Falls for such a major investment without some local knowledge or personal motivation. The moment had arrived. Principal Wells looked toward the back corner where I sat quietly among the other community members, her slight nod indicating that the time for revelation had come. The transition from invisible observer to central figure would be dramatic, but I had been preparing for this moment throughout months of careful planning and strategic patience. I stood slowly, feeling the attention of the room shift toward me as people recognized the girl who had been systematically dismissed just hours earlier during reunion conversations. The transformation from background character to primary protagonist was striking, though I maintained the same calm demeanor that had characterized all of my interactions with former classmates. TechFlow Solutions was founded in Cedar Falls by someone who learned programming in this building's computer lab, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the library's acoustics. The company's investment in transforming our high school represents our commitment to ensuring that future students have access to opportunities that extend far beyond what was available to previous generations. The silence that followed was profound and electric. Derek's face went through a series of expressions as he processed the implications of what I had just revealed. The little computer business he had dismissed so casually at the reunion was not only real, but substantial enough to purchase his target acquisition outright, while offering terms that no traditional development firm could match. Ashley's carefully maintained composure cracked visibly as she realized that the quiet girl she had barely acknowledged during high school had been operating at a level of success that made their own achievements seem modest by comparison. The social hierarchy that had seemed so firmly established just hours earlier was suddenly revealed as based on incomplete information and fundamentally flawed assumptions. Other reunion attendees began connecting the dots between our conversations, the previous evening and the magnitude of what was being announced. My reluctance to provide details about my consulting work now made perfect sense, as did my calm response to Derek's condescending assessment of my career prospects and business acumen. The questions that followed were different in tone and substance from the earlier inquiries about TechFlow Solutions' qualifications and intentions. Community members wanted to understand how someone they had known since childhood had built a company capable of transforming their hometown's future while operating so far below their social radar. Derek's questions became increasingly specific and pointed, reflecting his professional need to understand how he had been so thoroughly outmaneuvered by a competitor he had never even recognized as existing. His real estate expertise was sufficient to appreciate the complexity and scale of what TechFlow Solutions had accomplished, making his earlier dismissal all the more embarrassing and professionally damaging. I have to admit, Lisa, I'm genuinely impressed by what you've achieved, he said during a brief recess in the formal proceedings, his tone now respectful but strained with the effort of acknowledging his spectacular miscalculation. I clearly underestimated the scope and significance of your business when we spoke yesterday evening. The apology was necessary but insufficient, given the public nature of his earlier dismissal and the magnitude of his error in judgment. Derek's reputation as Cedar Falls' premier business leader had been built on his ability to assess opportunities and competition accurately. His failure to recognize a major player operating literally within his own community raised serious questions about his judgment that would extend far beyond this specific situation. I appreciate your honesty, Derek, I replied, accepting his acknowledgement while noting that the damage to his professional standing would require more than private apologies to address. I think this situation demonstrates how much we can all learn when we approach business relationships with genuine curiosity, rather than predetermined assumptions about what constitutes meaningful achievement. My response was diplomatically phrased, but contained a subtle reminder that Derek's error reflected broader patterns of dismissiveness that had characterized many of my interactions with former classmates. The lesson extended beyond business competition into fundamental questions about how communities identify, evaluate, and support different types of talent and ambition. The revelation's impact rippled through the room as community members reassessed not only their understanding of my circumstances, but their broader assumptions about success, visibility, and the different paths that could lead to significant accomplishment. The quiet girl with impractical computer dreams had not only succeeded beyond their imagination, but had chosen to invest that success in transforming the very community that had consistently underestimated her potential. As the meeting continued with detailed presentations about the Academy's development timeline and community benefits, I observed the fundamental shift in social dynamics that my revelation had triggered. The girl who had been invisible at the Psi reunion was now the center of attention, fielding questions about educational philosophy, economic development strategy, and regional transformation initiatives. Derek Hamilton sat quietly through these exchanges, his earlier confidence replaced by the sobered recognition that he had missed the most significant business opportunity in Cedar Falls's recent history because he had been operating with incomplete information and outdated assumptions about who possessed real influence and capability. The transformation was just beginning. Within hours, news of the acquisition would spread throughout the region, establishing Cedar Falls as an emerging center for educational innovation, while simultaneously creating a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating people based on limited understanding of their circumstances and achievements. The girl with the little computer business had just demonstrated that quiet competence often accomplishes more than visible self-promotion, and that the most satisfying victories are those that create opportunities for others while forcing critics to confront the limitations of their own judgment and assumptions about what constitutes meaningful success. 2 years had passed since that October afternoon when I stood in the Cedar Falls High School library and revealed that TechFlow Solutions belonged to the girl Derek Hamilton had mocked for her little computer business. The intervening months had brought changes that exceeded even my most optimistic projections, transforming not just our alma mater, but the entire fabric of our community in ways that continued to surprise longtime residents. The Cedar Falls Academy for Technology and Innovation had officially opened its doors 6 months earlier, with an inaugural class of 300 students drawn from across Ohio and 6 neighboring states. The dormitory complex housed young people from backgrounds as diverse as inner-city Cleveland and rural Kentucky farm families, all united by exceptional academic ability and shared excitement about educational opportunities available nowhere else in the region. I walked through the Academy's central courtyard on a crisp March morning, noting how naturally the new architecture blended with the original high school building that had been lovingly restored rather than demolished. The design preserved the institutional character that generations of Cedar Falls families recognized as their own, while integrating technology infrastructure that rivaled anything found at major research universities. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the former MIT professor who served as Academy Dean, emerged from the artificial intelligence laboratory that occupied the space where I had first learned programming 15 years earlier. Her satisfaction was evident as she described the latest research partnerships that were positioning Cedar Falls as a legitimate player in educational technology development. The National Science Foundation site visit exceeded all our expectations, she reported, consulting her tablet for updates from the morning's faculty meeting. They're recommending us for the pilot program that could bring an additional $12 million in research funding over the next 3 years. The federal recognition represented validation that extended far beyond local pride or regional economic development. The Academy was proving that rural communities could compete effectively for resources and talent traditionally concentrated in urban research institutions, provided they had access to appropriate infrastructure and visionary leadership. More significantly, the Academy's success was inspiring similar initiatives throughout the Midwest. State education officials had identified 17 other rural districts that could benefit from technology-focused transformation, creating a network of innovation hubs that would challenge traditional assumptions about where cutting-edge research and development could occur. Tom Rodriguez joined our conversation with news that reflected the broader economic transformation that had accompanied the Academy's development. The mayor just confirmed that Quantum Dynamics is moving their regional headquarters to Cedar Falls, he announced, his excitement evident despite his typically understated demeanor. They'll be bringing 47 engineers and support staff to work on autonomous vehicle systems. The corporate relocation represented exactly the kind of economic diversification that the academy had been designed to attract. Technology companies were discovering that Cedar Falls offered advantages that expensive urban markets couldn't match. Highly educated workforce, competitive operating costs, quality of life that attracted and retained talent, and proximity to research facilities that could support innovation initiatives. The ripple effects extended throughout the community in ways that had exceeded every projection. Property values had stabilized after initial rapid appreciation, creating wealth for longtime residents while maintaining affordability for young families attracted by employment opportunities. Main Street businesses had evolved to serve an increasingly sophisticated clientele while preserving the authentic character that distinguished Cedar Falls from generic suburban developments. Most remarkably, the transformation had occurred without the cultural friction that often accompanies rapid change. In small communities, the Academy's leadership had prioritized community engagement and local hiring wherever possible, ensuring that longtime residents benefited from new opportunities rather than feeling displaced by outside influences. Derek Hamilton's real estate company had thrived during this period, though his role in the community's transformation remained that of a competent service provider rather than a visionary leader. His professional recovery from the public embarrassment of dismissing my achievements had been admirably pragmatic, focusing on serving clients attracted by opportunities he had neither created nor anticipated. Our relationship had evolved into something resembling collegial respect, though the foundation remained complicated by the public nature of his initial error and its lasting consequences for his professional reputation. Derek had become a cautionary figure throughout the region, cited in business schools and professional development programs as an example of how assumptions based on incomplete information could lead to spectacular miscalculations. The March morning's agenda included a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Academy's new startup incubator, a facility that would support student entrepreneurs while attracting young professionals interested in launching technology companies outside traditional urban markets. The incubator represented the Academy's evolution from educational institution to economic catalyst, creating opportunities that would keep talented young people in Ohio rather than losing them to coastal technology centers. The ceremony attracted several hundred attendees, including state legislators, technology industry representatives, and venture capital investors, curious about opportunities emerging in unexpected locations. The media coverage would establish Cedar Falls' national profile while highlighting the Academy's role in challenging conventional wisdom about rural economic development. Principal Catherine Wells, now bearing the expanded title of Community Relations Director, had embraced her role as spokesperson for the transformation that had redefined her career and community. Her presentations to visiting delegations from other rural districts had become models for how educational innovation could drive comprehensive regional development. 2 years ago, we were discussing which programs to eliminate due to budget constraints, she told the assembled crowd, her confidence now matching her expanded responsibilities. Today, we're hosting entrepreneurs who are choosing Cedar Falls over Silicon Valley for launching their companies. Her comment captured the magnitude of change that extended far beyond simple facility upgrades or enrollment expansion. The Academy had become a demonstration that rural communities could create their own advantages, rather than simply competing for scraps from urban economies. Derek Hamilton approached me during the reception that followed the formal ceremony, his demeanor reflecting the professional respect that had replaced his earlier dismissive attitude. "Lisa, I wanted you to know that the Quantum Dynamics executives specifically mentioned the Academy's reputation as a factor in their relocation decision," he said, his tone now businesslike rather than socially condescending. The conversation that followed was purely professional, focusing on coordination between real estate development and the Academy's continued expansion. Derek's expertise remained valuable within its appropriate scope, though his influence was clearly secondary to forces he had neither anticipated nor controlled. What struck me most about our interaction was how completely the social dynamics had been transformed from our high school years. Derek's confidence had once been based on inherited privilege and community recognition that seemed permanently established. My invisibility had reflected both personal awkwardness and the community's inability to imagine alternative definitions of success and achievement. Now our relative positions reflected actual accomplishments rather than social assumptions or family connections. Derek remained a competent local businessman, but his influence was limited to traditional services within a market shaped by innovations he had failed to recognize. My role as the catalyst for regional transformation was established through demonstrated results rather than inherited status. The shift was evident in how other community members approached our conversation. Whereas reunion attendees had once clustered around Derek to hear his opinions about business and development, they now sought my perspective on issues ranging from educational policy to technology trends that would shape the region's future. Ashley Hamilton joined our group with questions that revealed her sophisticated understanding of the Academy's economic impact and its implications for regional development. Her banker's training was evident in her analysis of multiplier effects and investment flows, though her assessment was now based on realities created by others rather than initiatives developed by her family. The Academy's success has positioned Cedar Falls as a legitimate alternative to urban technology centers. She observed, her analysis accurate but reflecting opportunities rather than threats to existing power structures. That creates demand for financial services, professional support, and infrastructure development that could sustain growth for decades. Her comment demonstrated the Hamilton family's successful adaptation to circumstances they had neither predicted nor controlled. Their prosperity would now depend on effectively serving markets created by the girl they had once dismissed as having impractical ambitions and insufficient understanding of business realities. The conversation was joined by Brian Foster, who had parlayed his insurance background into a consulting practice serving technology companies relocating to rural markets. His success reflected the broader opportunities that the Academy's presence had created for local professionals willing to develop new expertise. I never imagined that my Cedar Falls connection would become a professional advantage, Brian admitted, his gratitude evident as he described contracts with companies seeking guidance on operating in small communities. The Academy has created opportunities that none of us saw coming. His observation captured something essential about the transformation that had occurred. The Academy hadn't simply brought outside resources to Cedar Falls, but had revealed potential that had always existed within the community. Local professionals were discovering that their knowledge of rural markets and small-town dynamics was valuable to companies seeking alternatives to expensive urban locations. As the reception concluded and attendees dispersed to afternoon activities, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The girl who had been mocked for her little computer business had not only succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, but had used that success to demonstrate the transformative power of investing in community rather than simply escaping its limitations. The evening news coverage of the incubator ceremony featured interviews with student entrepreneurs who had chosen to launch their companies in Cedar Falls rather than pursuing opportunities in traditional technology centers. Their reasons were consistent: access to world-class resources, supportive community environment, competitive operating costs, and proximity to research facilities that could accelerate innovation. More significantly, several featured students were Ohio natives who had planned to leave the state after graduation, but now saw opportunities to build successful careers without sacrificing the quality of life that rural communities could provide. The Academy was proving that talent retention didn't require matching urban salaries if you could offer advantages that money couldn't buy in expensive metropolitan markets. The local newspaper's editorial page featured a retrospective piece examining the 2-year transformation and its lessons for other rural communities. The analysis was thoughtful and comprehensive, acknowledging both the remarkable success of the Academy initiative and the broader implications for regional economic development strategies. One paragraph particularly captured the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The Cedar Falls Academy demonstrates that rural communities can create their own competitive advantages, rather than simply hoping for external investment or government intervention. The key lies in identifying and supporting local talent while remaining open to innovations that challenge conventional assumptions about development and success. The editorial's conclusion referenced Derek Hamilton's now famous miscalculation at the reunion, noting that his error had become a teaching tool in business schools throughout Ohio. The lesson extends beyond individual embarrassment into fundamental questions about how we recognize and nurture potential within our own communities. 3 months after the incubator opening, I received an invitation that would have seemed impossible during my high school years. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy had selected the Cedar Falls Academy as the site for a major policy announcement about rural innovation initiatives, recognizing our success as a model for addressing the technology gap between urban and rural America. The presidential visit brought national media attention that established Cedar Falls as a symbol of rural renewal and technological innovation. The coverage emphasized how a small Ohio community had transformed itself through vision, investment, and commitment to excellence rather than waiting for external solutions to their challenges. Standing in the same gymnasium where Derek Hamilton had dismissed my little computer business just over 2 years earlier, I watched the President of the United States announce a billion-dollar federal initiative to replicate the Cedar Falls model in rural communities throughout America. The irony was perfect. The girl who had been invisible at her high school reunion was now helping to shape national policy on technology and rural development. The President's remarks included specific recognition of TechFlow Solutions' role in demonstrating that private investment could drive comprehensive community transformation when guided by vision that extended beyond immediate profit maximization. The federal initiative would provide matching funds and technical assistance to help other rural communities develop their own versions of the Academy model. Derek Hamilton attended the White House event as a member of the official Cedar Falls delegation, his presence reflecting both his current role in the community's development and his symbolic importance as someone who had initially failed to recognize the potential that was emerging within his own hometown. His gracious participation in the ceremony demonstrated professional maturity, though the contrast with his reunion dismissal remained stark. After the President's departure and the media attention subsided, I found myself walking through the Academy's halls during the quiet evening hours when students were studying and faculty were preparing for the next day's classes. The transformation was complete in ways that extended far beyond physical facilities or academic programs. The Academy had become exactly what I had envisioned during those late nights in the community college computer lab, a place where exceptional talent could thrive regardless of geographic location or family background. Students from rural Kentucky were collaborating with peers from urban Cleveland on research projects that would influence the future of artificial intelligence. Faculty members who had left prestigious universities were discovering that they could pursue groundbreaking research while maintaining the personal connections and community involvement that had drawn them to Cedar Falls. Most importantly, the Academy was proving that success didn't require abandoning your origins, but could emerge from transforming them. The quiet girl with impractical computer dreams had found a way to honor her hometown while creating opportunities that extended far beyond anything that had previously seemed possible. The final vindication came not through confrontation or public humiliation of those who had dismissed my ambitions, but through the simple demonstration that underestimated people often possess the vision and determination necessary to transform entire communities. Derek Hamilton's error had become a footnote in a much larger story about the power of perseverance, the importance of recognizing potential wherever it emerges, and the transformative impact that can result when someone chooses to invest in the community that shaped them. As I locked the academy's main entrance and walked toward my car in the parking lot where I had once felt invisible among my more socially connected classmates, I thought about the reunion evening that had triggered this entire transformation. Derek's dismissive comment about my little computer business had revealed more about his limitations than mine, demonstrating that true leadership required the ability to recognize potential in unexpected places rather than simply managing existing advantages. The Cedar Falls Academy for Technology and Innovation stands today as a testament to the power of quiet accomplishment, the importance of long-term thinking, and the reality that the most satisfying victories are those that create opportunities for others, while proving that dismissive judgments often reveal more about the critic than the subject of their criticism. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is not argument or confrontation, but building something so substantial that it forces others to reconsider their assumptions about what is possible. The girl with the little computer business had proven that success is not about conforming to other people's expectations, but about creating value so significant that it transforms the very community that once failed to recognize its potential. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.